actually look in and go down and add mirror. And in other 3D programs it's called reflection, but they call it mirror in this program. And we're just going to give it a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit of reflectivity. You can see this is around 0.05. And let's render out the image and see what we got. So after doing the wood, we're also going to do the same thing and put this onto the frame. So I'll select the frame, and because I already have a material, I don't need to do a new one, so I just click the little drop down here and I can choose wood. And you can see why naming stuff is kind of handy. I forgot to name the eraser. Actually, I can just pull up material 001 at this point, change it to eraser, and then go and say back to wood, and it's not going to hurt anything. So now we have that rendered out, and we have a wood surface that's reflective. And once again, we'll look at this more next week. So we have the glass, and I'm going to try to make that like a mirror surface. So here. And the mirror doesn't really have much diffuse. It's all being driven by the reflection. You can see that as it starts to get darker, the specular, it actually starts to look a little bit more like a normal mirror. You can play around. Sometimes people do stop highlights, and a lot of it also depends on kind of what lighting situation you want. And then the big thing is to come down the mirror, and once again, we don't need that much. Let's render this out and see what we got. And once you start getting things that are reflective, you're going to see it. And let's increase that a little bit more. And the one problem you're going to have, and this is the problem that I'm currently having here, is trying to get everything to properly visually line up. If we look at this scene, the mirror is kind of ahead of everything else and also based on the angle. So if I take the mirror and I move it back a little, let's render and see if that helps us to actually see the lamp at all. So we're not seeing the lamp. Okay, so let's pull it forward and see if that helps at all. And you can see that we're starting to see it, and actually the reason you can't see it right now is because the specularity is actually washing it out. So I can increase the reflectivity, and this means I might have to adjust the composition as well. The intensity is pretty hard. It's fine, it's just the hardness. Let's try to fix that a little and try this one more time. And the other thing you'll see with the reflectivity is it takes longer, and it's rendering it out in a different way. And also we don't have any background around, so you can see there's a little bit, but once again the specularity is kind of hampering that a little. So you can play around on this and adjust it, and actually, yeah, there we go. I was adjusting the wrong one. So let's knock this intensity down and increase the reflectivity and do this again. So less specularity, and you can start to see the image, so you can adjust it. But you can see how optically it gets a little tricky to work with your composition, so you might have to move things around just to get that to work. We are going to do the glass next. Now we've talked a little bit about reflectivity, so I'll hit Control and B, and I'll border select the glass. And at this point, you can see that there's nothing really majorly exciting about this. Toggle on crop so that I can see it basically by itself, and we'll zoom in. And I have this modeled. I did this with a spline curve, but I actually have the inside and the outside modeled, so it's basically as close as I can get to a solid piece of geometry, and that's kind of critical. If you just have a 2D and not a 3D surface, when you go to do glass, it's going to look pretty fake. So let's select the glass, and we'll rename this glass. And the diffuse we don't necessarily have to worry about, because that's not going to be what's driving it. We come down and we toggle on transparency, and if I just go to render at this point, you'll see it's absolutely nothing, and that's because the alpha channel, which is the basically grayscale channel that people include in order to define how transparent a layer is set to 1. So if I come down, you can see that I'm starting to see more of it. So if we render the image, now you can see through it. Now the problem with this is almost how you would do it in Photoshop, where you would have multiple layers and you adjust the opacity of a layer. This isn't accurate, and so what we use instead is we use ray traced. And when you add the ray traced and you go back, now once again we got to knock the alpha down to get what we want. So let's go and render this out, and you'll see what it's doing is it looks a little bit more realistic because it's actually starting to do some stuff with the light. Now what the major thing that's happening is it's not bending the light that's coming through the surface, which is called refraction, and there's this IOR, which is index of refraction, and 1 is kind of your basic surface, and if we go and we increase that a little bit and we go to render it, you can see now it's starting to bend the light and it's starting to look more realistic. So even just with a little change, and then the Fresnel effect is basically just how the edges are being addressed. So you can add a little bit of Fresnel as well, and it's pretty subtle, but it's altering. It basically makes the edges thicker and the inside thinner as far as how transparency and those types of things. So you play with those, and then the other thing to help make this look a little bit more realistic is just a hint of reflectivity. And that helps to kind of pull in some of the colors in the space, and you can start to see some different objects. So that's working with the glass. At this point, the only thing we have left is the lamp. I'll select the lamp base, and also I'll clear out the border and the crop, and Control B again, and we'll come in and we'll select the lamp so we can work on it. And I'm going to start with selecting the base, so let's do a new material, and this is how I'd recommend doing proper metals. So this is going to be lamp metal, and the first thing is the diffuse of the a metal is actually very dark. It's the specular highlight that actually kind of drives it. So we're going to try to make this kind of a goldish color. So I'm going to make it yellow, and then I'm going to knock the value down a lot. So you can see it's pretty dark. Knock down the saturation as well, so it's almost like a kind of flat brown. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to do the specularity, and the specularity I'm actually going to do as an orange. And you can see that it's already starting to look like gold because the specular highlight is actually changing the color. And we can manipulate this and play around with it to get kind of different looks as we want. Let me just, and the other thing to add to it to help it make a little bit more realistic is a little bit of reflectivity to it. And you can see you can also tint the reflectivity, so if you want you can actually sample out the yellow and get things to be a little bit more consistent. So let's render and see what we got with this, and you can see that that's starting to look a lot more like a metal than the clamp that we had done before, so hopefully you can see some of the contrast between the two, and that's kind of the recommended process. We'll select the frame and we'll choose from the drop down list, and we'll grab lamp metal onto that. F12, render that out, and now you can see we're starting to get a sheen, and that's actually coming through the glass and hitting the metal. The last thing I have to do is the material for the glass on the lamp. The first thing I'm going to do is add a material. I'm going to keep it pretty basic. The only thing I'm going to increase is translucency and render it out, and you'll see that it looks like it's illuminating from inside. The other thing is the key light currently does not have a shadow, so if I do ray trace shadows and toggle that on, I go to render, now you can see we're actually getting the shadow on the top and the bottom. The part that we're missing is we're not getting any transparency going through the actual shade itself. So a couple things, issues or things we have to look at is go back to lamp glass. Now if I toggle on transparency and set this to ray trace and knock it down just a bit, and I go to render, you'll see that we don't see anything changing at this point, and that's because we have to select the walls, and we have to make sure that they receive the transparent rays, and the instant you do that, you can see this is on. Now we're kind of good to go, and then you can kind of tweak. You can see right now the lamp class, I actually have it a little too transparent. So knock the alpha up a little, and let's render this out and see what we got. Okay, and now we got a little bit, and if for some reason we want to play around changing the color, yes, I go in and change this color, and it's going to be a little extreme, but just to show you, if I change it, all of a sudden now we're going to start getting a different color actually passing through the class as well. Let me white out the walls as well so you can see what's happening. So, and there we have it. So that's the conclusion. Oh, I got to change receive shadows on. There we go, and you can see the pink color is actually coming through the surface. So that concludes this demo.